Montana Territory, 1881. The wind howled through the broken roof of the cabin like a wounded animal, and Olivia Parmer wrapped her arms tighter around her 5-year-old daughter, Opal, as snow crept in through the rafters. "I'm hungry, Mama," Opal whispered, her voice fragile as a thread. "I know, sweetheart," Olivia said softly, brushing a strand of dark hair from Opal's cheek. She pulled the threadbare quilt tighter around them both, her eyes fixed on the sagging ceiling above. "Tomorrow I'll find something." They had already gone without much for days. No meat, no milk, just a few potatoes left. The storm had blown in hard and fast, and the leaky roof had given up the fight some time yesterday. Now the floor was soaked, the hearth cold, and the firewood nearly gone. Olivia's hands were raw from chopping and hauling what little she could gather, and her heart ached with a loneliness she could not show her daughter. Her husband, James, had been gone for nearly 2 years now, shot dead over a cattle dispute that was not even his. The land they lived on was all that was left to her 70 acres of frostbitten ground, a half-collapsed barn, and this house that was barely standing. She had no one left. No family, just her child, and this broken roof. That night, Olivia lay awake long after Opal had gone to sleep, her arms around her daughter, staring into the dark. She had prayed every night for mercy, for warmth, for help. At first light, she saddled the old mule and rode into town. Her coat was too thin, her boots worn through, but she kept her chin raised. She sold a pair of James's old hunting knives at the general store for flour and beans. She did not ask for help. She never did. "Roof still leaking?" asked Albie, the storekeeper, as he handed her the sack. Olivia nodded once. It will hold. But it would not. And they both knew it. She was halfway back to the cabin when she saw the cowboy. He was working alone at the edge of a clearing, crouched beside a wagon with a broken wheel. His coat was dusted with snow, his dark brown hair pushed back under his hat, and he stood when he heard her mule's hooves crunching over the frozen ground. "You headed west?" he asked, his voice deep but gentle. "I'm headed home," Olivia answered cautiously, slowing the mule. "You need help?" He gave a small shrug, his eyes studying her. "Wheel cracked, I can fix it, just need the right wood." She tilted her head toward her sack. "I have a few things to trade if you're looking." "Not looking for trade," he said. Then after a pause, "I am looking for work, though." She studied him. He had the look of a man who had seen too much and said too little. His coat was worn but mended, his boots solid. There was a quiet in his eyes, an honest kind. "I got no money," Olivia said. "And no work worth doing." "You got a roof that leaks," he said, nodding toward the frost on her shoulders. She blinked. "I noticed," he added. "That sack's heavy. You came from town, snow in your hair, your hands are bleeding from splitting wood." "Who are you?" she asked, suddenly uneasy. He gave a half-smile. "Name's Fletcher Vaughn. Been drifting since the war, looking for a place to earn my keep." Olivia hesitated. Then she looked at the sky, already darkening with another round of clouds, and the path ahead that led to her broken house and her waiting child. "You know how to fix a roof?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She gave him a long, measured look. "Then come on," she said, nudging the mule forward, "but I cannot feed you more than beans." "Beans'll do just fine." Back at the cabin, Opal peeked out from behind the curtain when she saw the stranger. "Mama, who's that?" "A man needing work. His name's Fletcher." Fletcher knelt in front of the girl. "You must be Opal." She nodded shyly, holding her small rag doll close to her chest. "You like roofs that do not drip on your bed?" he asked. She giggled and nodded again. "Then I better get to work," he said with a wink. Within the hour, Fletcher had hauled a ladder from the barn and climbed up, inspecting the damage. Olivia watched him through the window, arms crossed, unsure whether she had just made a mistake. But when she saw the way he moved, steady, focused, careful, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. By nightfall, he had patched the worst of the holes with leftover shingles from the barn wall and sealed the seams with boiled pine sap. It was not perfect, but it kept the snow out. They ate together that night, huddled around the fire. Olivia watched her daughter laugh for the first time in weeks. Fletcher told her a story about a horse that refused to cross a river and ended up dragging a cowboy into it. "You ever have children?" Olivia asked him quietly once Opal had fallen asleep in her lap. Fletcher looked into the fire. "No, ma'am, never married," she nodded. "I did not expect help, not from anyone." "I did not expect to be here," he said, his voice low. "But I am." When he looked at her, something in her chest stirred. It had been a long time since a man had looked at her like that, with no pity, no want, just quiet understanding. She stood. "You can sleep in the barn. There is hay and blankets," he nodded. "Thank you." She paused at the door. "You could have kept walking." "I could have," he said. "But then I would not have fixed that roof." And he smiled, slow, real, and for the first time in a long time, Olivia smiled back. The next morning, Fletcher was already outside, chopping wood. Olivia watched from the porch, the cold air biting her cheeks. He worked without pause, his breath misting in the morning light, arms strong and sure as he split log after log. Her daughter ran out to him, barefoot and bold. "You gonna stay?" Fletcher looked down at her, then across to Olivia. "If your mama lets me," he said. "I have got more fixing to do." And Olivia, standing there with her arms around herself, felt something settle deep in her chest. Maybe this was the answer to her prayers. Not a miracle, just a man with strong hands and a kind heart. And maybe, just maybe, he was exactly what they needed. The days fell into rhythm, steady and slow as sunrises over the bitterroots. Fletcher took to mending the barn wall next, replacing warped boards with salvaged wood from the collapsed shed behind the corral. Olivia kept to her routines, tending to the small garden bed beneath the kitchen window, boiling beans, brushing the tangles from Opal's hair each morning, but something in her pace eased. She didn't notice it at first. Only when she caught herself humming while rinsing the washbin did she realize the tightness in her chest had loosened. Late one afternoon, Olivia gathered the last of the laundry from the line just as a cold gust swept across the field. Fletcher was stacking chopped wood by the lean-to, his sleeves rolled past his elbows. She hesitated at the porch, watching him for a moment longer than she meant to. He caught her eye and nodded toward the barn. "Hinges on the south door are rusted clean through." "I've got oil in the pantry," she said. "It's not much, but it might ease the worst of it. I'll give it a try." His voice was even, never too loud. He never asked questions she didn't offer answers for. She stepped inside and returned with the bottle wrapped in cloth, holding it out. "It's been there a while. Might need warming." Fletcher took it without brushing her fingers, but the closeness between their hands pulled something quiet through her, not longing exactly, more like the memory of it. That evening, Opal fell asleep at the table, her head nestled against a folded flour sack. Fletcher carried her to the cot without being asked. Olivia watched him tuck the quilt beneath her chin, his movements sure but reverent, like someone touching old pages of a book. "You've got away with her," she said once they stepped outside. "She reminds me of my sister," he said after a long pause, "back before the raids." He kept his eyes on the horizon where a pale red streak still lingered in the west. "She was 7. We were taking fence line down for winter." She laughed every time the posts fell crooked. Olivia folded her arms. "Did she make it?" "No." His voice was quiet but not broken. "She died that spring. Fever took her. After that, nothing really held together." They stood in silence, the cold settling over their shoulders like a second coat. Olivia looked down at the snow-packed step beneath her feet, then back at him. "You sleep in the barn every night," she said. "You don't have to." "I don't mind it." "I didn't say you did." He met her eyes then, and something passed between them, not heat, not yet, but a kind of steadiness. A knowing, she turned toward the door. "There's blankets by the hearth if you get tired of the straw." "I'll keep that in mind." The next morning, Fletcher brought back a snare with a rabbit caught clean through the neck. Olivia said nothing, just took it gently and began to dress it by the creek behind the house. He crouched beside her, rinsing his hands in the cold water, and after a time he spoke. "Came through Wyoming before this. Worked a branding line for a man who thought shouting made him important." She glanced at him. "And you left, didn't shout back, so he figured I was slow. "I'm not slow, Mrs. Parmer." "I didn't think you were." The rabbit's belly split open under her blade, steam rising into the morning air. Fletcher handed her the cloth she kept tucked at her hip, and she wiped her hands clean. "You ever think of leaving?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said. "But where would I go? The land's paid for. Opal's known no other place," he nodded. "It's not a bad piece of earth. Just needs time." They rose together, walking back toward the cabin, neither in a hurry. That night, Olivia sat by the fire long after Opal had gone to sleep. Fletcher was outside still, checking the fence line for gaps where the wind had blown snowdrifts high. She listened for his return without realizing it. When the door creaked open, she didn't startle. He shrugged off his coat and laid it over the chair. "No breaks in the wire, just a mule deer trail." She motioned to the hearth. "There's coffee on." "Weak but warm." He poured a tin cup and sat across from her. The fire cast long shadows across the walls, and in the hush, the only sound was the pop of pine sap in the flame. "Why do you stay?" she asked suddenly. He didn't answer right away. "Then, because it's quiet here." "Because you don't ask more than I can give." She looked into the fire, then back at him. "And if I ever did, I'd give what I could." She let out a breath, slow and even. "I was 22 when I came here, thought I knew what hard meant. But the land, it teaches you different. Teaches you to listen," Fletcher said. "And to wait." They sat in silence again, not needing to fill it. When she rose to bank the fire, she brushed his shoulder as she passed. He didn't move away. In the dim light, she looked back at him. "Blankets are still by the hearth." "I saw." She left the door open behind her as she climbed the ladder to the loft. A few moments later, she heard his boots ease onto the floorboards. Then the soft rustle of blankets and the long, slow breath of a man settling in to stay. The thaw came slow that spring, peeling back the snow in cautious strips until the earth beneath showed itself, damp and dark. Water pooled in the ruts beside the barn where Fletcher had laid new planks, and the creek behind the cabin ran faster now, tugging last year's leaves loose from the banks. Fletcher stood at the fence line, watching the ridge where bands of elk sometimes wandered through before the melt was full. Olivia joined him with her sleeves rolled past her elbows, her apron damp with soap water, and a quiet stillness between them that no longer felt uncertain. "I'll need to dig out the root cellar," she said, brushing her hands on the fabric. "Some of the wall gave with the frost." "I'll do it this afternoon," Fletcher said. "You've got your hands full with the sewing." Olivia glanced back toward the porch where a pile of muslin and worn trousers waited for mending. "It doesn't pay much." "It doesn't have to," Fletcher replied, then added, "Not if we plant smart this season." She turned to him, brows lifting. "You plan to stay through planting?" He didn't look away. "I do," she nodded once slowly. "Then we'll need to clear more than the east patch. Beets won't hold us long." "I can break ground near the cottonwoods," he said. "Soil's soft there." They stood without speaking after that, wind threading through the posts as if considering the quiet between them. Then Opal's voice rose from the porch. "Ma, there's a man coming." Olivia stepped forward, shielding her eyes from the morning glare. A rider approached from the north trail, his horse moving slow, saddle low with travel. Fletcher's hand rested on the fence rail, but his gaze sharpened. The man pulled up just shy of the barn. His beard was trimmed short, coat heavy with trail dust. Olivia recognized him before he said a word. "Matthew," she said, her voice caught. James's younger brother dismounted, brushing his gloves off on his thigh. "Liv, heard about James. I came as soon as I could." "That was over a year ago," she said, not cold but not warm either. He looked past her to the cabin, then to Opal, who now stood barefoot on the porch. "I was up in the Black Hills. Didn't know until a ranch hand crossed me near Lewistown. Thought I should see if you needed." "We're fine," Olivia said. Matthew glanced toward Fletcher. "You've got help, I see." Fletcher met his gaze without change. "Name's Vaughn. I work the land with Mrs. Parmer." "I'm family," Matthew said, stepping forward. "No," Olivia said, quiet but firm. "You were James's brother. That doesn't make you mine." He blinked. "I didn't mean offense. I didn't say you did. But if you're here thinking I need taking care of, that's not it, he said quickly. I thought maybe I could help with the place. Stay a while. Fletcher stepped back, giving her the space to speak. Olivia looked at the man in front of her, then at the man beside her. This place has been held together by calloused hands and quiet mornings, she said, her voice steady. If you're here to work, there's a fence to mend west of the hill. If you're here for something else, we don't need it. Matthew looked between them. You've got feelings for him. Olivia didn't flinch. I've got a daughter who sleeps warm now. I've got a roof that doesn't leak. And I've got a man who's never once asked me for anything I didn't want to give. Matthew swallowed, then nodded. I'll mend the fence. He stayed 3 nights, worked without complaint, and left without ceremony. Fletcher didn't speak much of it, and neither did she. By the end of April, the ground was ready. They worked together each morning, Fletcher guiding the mule through the furrows while Olivia dropped seed behind. Opal followed barefoot, placing small stones to mark rows. The rhythm of it settled into them, sweat on the brow, dirt under the nails, and the unspoken promise that came with planting. A future not yet seen but believed in. One evening, after the last row was set, Olivia stood at the edge of the field with her arms dusted in soil, her braid loose down her back. Fletcher walked up beside her, his shirt clinging damp to his shoulders. You've built something here, he said. She looked toward the cabin, the smoke curling from the chimney, the barn squared and solid in the dusk. She corrected. He watched her, something unspoken in his eyes. Then, instead of words, he reached for her hand. He didn't take it fully, just let his fingers rest against hers, open and waiting. She turned her palm to his and threaded their fingers together. They stood like that as the stars came, not needing to speak. Tomorrow there would be more to do, fences to check, potatoes to hill, but for now the land was quiet beneath them, and Olivia's heart, for the first time in years, was not. By late May, the ground was warm enough to walk barefoot before breakfast. Olivia stepped onto the porch with her coffee, the steam rising in the hush of morning. Inside, Opal still slept curled like a kitten, her doll tucked beneath her chin. Olivia let the screen door fall shut behind her and stood watching Fletcher at the edge of the field. He was checking the wire gate, his shoulders moving slow and deliberate in the early light. She walked to him, cup in hand. Something wrong? He shook his head. No, just making sure the post's holding. Mule leaned against it yesterday. She crouched beside the gate, brushing aside a cluster of thistle. I've been thinking of building a second pen, for hens maybe, if we could keep 'em safe. They do well here, he said. Plenty to scratch in come summer. She took a sip, the coffee bitter and thin. Would you know how to build a coop? I reckon I could figure it out. They stood together as the sun inched above the ridge. Olivia glanced at him sideways. You ever miss drifting? He didn't answer right away. I used to think I was good at being alone, he said. But after a while, all that silence just turns into noise. She nodded, quiet a moment. James never liked being still. Even in winter, he'd pace the yard like something was coming. Fletcher looked at her. You think it ever did? She met his eyes. I think it already had. He didn't press her. He never did. Later that day, she sent Opal out with a small tin to gather the first wild strawberries near the fence line. Olivia stayed by the cabin, sorting through a box of old clothes left in the loft. Fletcher helped her carry it down, setting it on the porch step. This yours? He asked, lifting a frayed shirt with one hand. It was James's, she said. Most of it won't fit anyone now. Fletcher folded it carefully and set it aside. We could use the cloth for patching. Or quilting, come fall. She looked at him, surprised. You quilt? My mother did, he said. I held the fabric for her, learned to stitch neat if I wanted supper before dark. Olivia laughed under her breath. I would have liked to meet her. She wasn't easy, he said. But she never let the fire go out, not once. That evening they sat on the back steps with Opal between them, her chin sticky with berry juice. Fletcher handed her a damp rag and she wiped her face with a sigh. I want a hen that lays brown eggs, she said. You'll need to feed her first, Olivia said, brushing a leaf from her daughter's hair. Fletcher leaned back on his hands, watching the wind ripple the grass. "We'll build her a house first, then she'll know she's meant to stay." As twilight deepened, Olivia turned to him. "I don't hear you talk about the war." Fletcher's face shifted just slightly. "Not much to say that doesn't settle heavy." "Did you lose someone?" He looked down. "Too many. Some I rode with, some I didn't even know the names of." She laid her hand on his knee, firm and steady. "You're not alone anymore." He looked at her then, and something shifted in his chest, something long buried. He didn't say thank you, he didn't have to. That night, after Opal had curled into her quilt, Olivia stood by the hearth brushing out her hair. Fletcher sat at the table, carving a small block of wood into something round. "What's that?" she asked. He turned it in his hand. "A button for her doll's dress. The old one's cracked." She stepped closer. "You notice everything, don't you?" "I try." She reached out and touched the edge of his jaw, rough with a day's growth. He didn't move. "I've been afraid to want again," she said, "but I'm not afraid of you." He stood slowly, setting the carving aside. "You don't have to be," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." When he kissed her, it wasn't sudden. It came like the thaw, slow and certain, nothing rushed. She leaned into him, her hands finding the shape of his back, and he held her like a man who knew exactly what this cost her and what it meant. In the loft that night, she lay beside him under the patchwork quilt, his hand resting over hers. The wind brushed against the eaves, but the house didn't creak. Not anymore. Outside, the stars wheeled over the field they'd planted together, and the land breathed quiet beneath them. By the first days of June, the land had softened fully, and green reached across the fields like a quiet promise kept. Wild iris bloomed near the creek, pale and trembling, and the mornings came early now, sun brushing the barn before the rooster had found his voice. Fletcher rose before the light most days, not out of habit but out of want. There was work to tend, yes, but he liked the still hour before the house stirred, when the world belonged only to sound and breath. He'd grown used to the slope of Olivia's shoulder beside him, the way her hair gathered along his chest when she shifted in sleep. He never woke her. He just watched the sun climb and felt the weight of something he never dared call joy, though it sat in him like a steady flame. Inside, Olivia moved slower in the mornings, not from weariness but from something quieter than rest-peace, maybe. She moved through the kitchen with her bare feet brushing the floorboards, her hands finding rhythm in each task. No part of her hurried now. The days belonged to her again. "Fence held through the wind last night," Fletcher said as he stepped inside, brushing dust from his sleeves. "Only a few leaves blown down near the coop." Olivia poured coffee dark as ink. "I was thinking of painting the cabin, just the front. I've got ochre powder tucked behind the flour sack." Fletcher leaned on the doorframe. "That'll brighten it some. Want me to help mix it?" She gave him a glance over her shoulder. "I want you to build me a porch swing." He grinned, slow and sure. "That I can do." That afternoon, he found the wood stacked behind the barn, old pine planks from the cart shed James had once meant to fix. Fletcher measured each piece, sanding the rough edges until his hands stung. He worked in silence, the sun warm on his back, the scent of cut wood rising with the wind. By supper time, the frame was ready, and he set it under the eave, chains looped through the beam above. Olivia stepped outside, drying her hands on her apron. She looked at the swing, then at him. "It's perfect," he nodded once. "Try it." She sat, the seat creaking gently beneath her, and leaned back with her eyes closed. "You think things can stay like this?" Fletcher sat beside her. "If we keep tending them, they might." She turned her head slightly, her cheek catching the last of the sun. "I used to think love was something loud, all heat and ache and wanting." He looked at her, his voice low. "And now I know it's this." She reached for his hand. "It's quiet. It's steady, it's someone who stays." Opal ran from the field, her cheeks red and her hands full of clover. "There's a nest in the coop," she said, breathless. 5 eggs, all warm." Olivia smiled, brushing dirt from her daughter's wrist. "Then we'll have breakfast come Sunday." Opal climbed into Fletcher's lap without asking, and he wrapped his arms around her as natural as breath. "You name the hen yet?" "Rosemary," Opal said. She looks like a rosemary," they laughed, and the swing rocked gentle beneath them. Later that week, Olivia found the ochre and mixed it with lard and water until it turned thick and golden. Fletcher climbed the ladder and painted the eaves while she brushed the lower walls. Opal sat in the grass, humming to herself, her doll tucked in a blue rag beside her. They worked until the sun dipped low and the house glowed soft against the dusk. Olivia leaned her back against the porch rail, her hands speckled with color, her dress stained at the hem. "You've turned this place into something else," Fletcher said, standing behind her. She shook her head. "No. I just gave it time to be what it was meant for." He stepped close, his hand brushing the back of her neck, his mouth warm against her temple. "And what's that?" She turned to him. "A home." The wedding was quiet. They stood beneath the cottonwood down by the creek, just the three of them and a preacher who rode in from town. Olivia wore a faded blue dress, and Opal tucked a sprig of mint behind her ear before she walked barefoot to stand beside them. Vows were spoken soft. Simple words, honest and plain. Fletcher held her hands like they were soil and seed, and Olivia looked at him like he was the first breath after drowning. Afterward, they ate cornbread and boiled apples beneath the sky, the sun lingering long into late evening. No neighbors came, none were needed. The land was their witness, and the wind carried their promises like pollen across the field. That night, Fletcher carried Olivia up the loft ladder, her laughter caught in his shirt. They lay beneath the quilt she'd stitched last winter, and he traced the curve of her collarbone with reverence, not hunger. She pressed her lips to his throat, her breath steady and sure, and they loved each other without rush or hesitation. No fear, no ghosts between them. Only warmth and the hush of a world finally right. Come late summer, the field bore full. Beets, carrots, and cabbage thick in the rows Fletcher had turned with his own hands. Olivia canned while Opal watched, the kitchen fragrant with vinegar and dill. The coop held firm through the first storm, and rosemary laid without fail. In the evenings, they sat on the swing, Fletcher's arm around Olivia while Opal fell asleep against their sides. The porch creaked gently beneath them, and the stars came out one by one. Fletcher had wandered for years, never certain where he might lay his head, never trusting that steadiness could be his. Olivia had buried too much hope to believe it might bloom again. But here, beneath a painted eave and a mended roof, with a child safe in their arms and the land fed and tended, they had found the thing neither had dared name, not luck. Not chance, love real and proven. A life built, not stumbled into, and it held always.